are there examples of green buildings that are iconic, or is this a oxymoron?
In my mind, green building must be the normal building for the future, not an iconic building. In a lot of countries today, they are pushing for going green, giving some gift to the developers if they build up green buildings. But in my mind, we have to think that green building is not only marketing tools today. It is a must, and we have to do this. And we have to do this according on the different culture, on the different habits, on the different situation around the world. What is incredible, and it is sustainable, is going around, traveling, and to see how it's different the world in the different countries. So we have to maintain this. We have to design for this kind of wonderful world that is the world where we live. And green building must be a normal point of view. Dr. Lamar?
I think there are several examples of green buildings that have assumed a kind of iconic status, but many of them tend to be in Europe. I can think of, for example, the Commons Bank by Foster and Partners that has kind of percolated into our teaching and our thinking and our writing as an example of how an environmental approach can fundamentally affect what a building looks and does. In Asia, not so much. Certainly there are examples. For example, in India, the CIA Godrej building, which was the firstly platinum-rated building, has kind of become a symbol of the green movement in the Indian context. And every country now has its own sort of landmark project. But I agree with Massimo that there's a limit to the value of the icon, and that really what we need to do is, they are valuable in terms of setting up the ideas that need to then find motion in everyday life, and that we run the risk of wanting to make every building an icon and therefore no building green, because not everything can be iconic. But if I could just comment on the risk of what I had made in my presentation, which is the idea that there is an aesthetics to greening, that there is a way in which we can communicate the greenness of a building through the way it looks and the way it engages the occupant. For a long time, we viewed this with considerable caution because it lends itself, I think, to greenwash, where it becomes possible for a building, and there are many examples of this, by the way, of buildings that use these technologies and these features, but actually do very little. So there you have an inverse effect of the aesthetics of greening, or the formal communication of greening. Now, I'd like to extend that question to Andy, because I know that a lot of what you do is the act of communication. But ultimately, do we know what that does on the ground? Do we know what that does to what the real issues are? I mean, if the message gets through, does it then get translated into action? And if I could just, before I hand over to him, I could just comment on the examples that I gave. These are projects with very strong green credentials that are then converted into a message for the occupants or the public. I would never have presented projects that simply use green technologies as symbols without an actual performance to back it up. So the two things need to go together, this kind of advocacy, the symbolism, but then the real outcome, the net outcome of that.
Yeah, really good question. Actually, a guy came up to me afterwards, and he was just on the greenwashing question. He came up to me and goes, "So is WWF following all the companies to check no one's greenwashing?" And it's probably the most important question that we get asked about this challenge, because it's sort of similar to what you're saying or asking. And I think we have to think about this really differently. Because if you go to the okay, I have 8 people, and there's also people working at their own life, how would 8 people ever be able to police a campaign of this scale? The answer is you can't. 8 people can't. But 1 billion participants can. And coming back to this whole idea of an interconnected global community, for me, the reason why we need to build that interconnected global community that's able to share its content, its information, is because everyone has to be part of this solution. Everyone has to be part of the detail behind why a building is truly doing the right sustainability job, rather than having a nice load of trees planted around it. I can't do that. I'm not the expert in it. It's not what I see our role as. Our role is to try and get the content out there, to empower people to be the advocates. But the symbolism is important, because if you have a building that looks like crap, who wants to work there? And I think that's the brand of this, is that they can't, none of this can be separated. We have to aesthetics as being really important. That whole thing, the car industry thing that I was talking about, for me that is the perfect example of, you can have beauty, you can have efficiency, but you have to think about how it looks, how it feels, how aspirational it is. And that doesn't matter if you're a community with very limited resources, very limited power even. How do you present, how do we think about these things aesthetically? This is about beauty. It's about the planet that we live on. It's about the one thing that we all share. How do we think of it in that integrated way and present it like that? Because at the moment, I don't think we are.
Are there any questions?